There are people who walk into a room and immediately command attention. They speak with confidence. They appear composed. They radiate certainty. You feel drawn toward them. Admiration feels natural. Trust feels easy. But what if the confidence is a costume? What if the charm is calibrated? What if the certainty hides instability? Not all dominance is strength. Not all charisma is health. Some personalities do not seek connection. They seek control. This is not about villains. This is about patterns. This is about structure. This is about understanding the psychological architecture behind narcissistic control, because once you see the structure, you stop being controlled by it. This is the psychology of narcissists, how they control you without you realizing. A strategic psychology masterclass from Audiobook Mantra. Introduction. The illusion of strength. Narcissism is often misunderstood. It is reduced to arrogance, vanity, self-obsession. But true narcissism is more complex. It is a personality structure built around fragile identity stabilization. It is not simply loving oneself too much. It is the desperate need to maintain a superior self-image at all costs, because beneath the superiority lies instability. And instability cannot survive exposure, so it constructs armor. Confidence becomes armor, charm becomes armor, control becomes armor, and if someone threatens that armor, they must be neutralized. Narcissists do not always shout, they do not always rage. Some are subtle, some are strategic, some are socially skilled, and the most effective ones never look dangerous. They look impressive. That is why they are difficult to detect. You do not fall into narcissistic dynamics because you are weak. You fall into them because the structure is invisible. Today, we make it visible. Chapter 1. The Mask of Superiority. The first thing you notice about a narcissistic personality is presence. They carry themselves with authority. They speak as if their opinions are facts. They project certainty in environments where others hesitate. Certainty is attractive. In a world filled with doubt, confidence feels like leadership, but confidence can be manufactured. Narcissistic superiority is not rooted in stable self-worth. It is constructed self-inflation, a protective narrative. I am exceptional. I am different. I am superior. This narrative must be maintained, not because it is true, but because without it, the underlying insecurity becomes unbearable. The mask of superiority serves three purposes. 1. It attracts admiration. 2. It suppresses criticism. 3. It prevents exposure. If others believe in the superiority, the narrative survives. If others question it, defense mechanisms activate. That defense may appear as dismissiveness, mockery, intellectual superiority, subtle belittling, emotional coldness. The goal is not resolution. The goal is hierarchy preservation. Because hierarchy stabilizes identity, the manufactured authority. Narcissists often position themselves as the smartest in the room, the most capable, the most insightful. They may exaggerate achievements, reframe failures as misunderstandings, attribute success entirely to themselves. They are skilled at impression management. Image matters more than authenticity. Authenticity risks exposure. Image protects control. Why the mask works? The mask works because humans are influenced by perceived confidence. Confidence signals competence. Competence signals safety. Safety builds trust, and trust opens access. Access allows influence. By the time inconsistencies appear, emotional attachment may already be formed. The early stage is admiration. Admiration reduces scrutiny, and reduced scrutiny increases vulnerability, the fragile core. But here is the paradox. True superiority does not require constant validation. True confidence does not require domination. True authority does not fear dissent. Narcissistic superiority does, because beneath the surface is an unstable self-concept. This instability creates hypersensitivity to criticism, defensive aggression, subtle revenge behaviors, image overcorrection. The mask is not decoration, it is survival. Strategic insight. When you encounter overwhelming superiority, observe the reaction to disagreement. Healthy confidence tolerates challenge. Fragile superiority attacks it. The mask begins to crack, not under praise but under scrutiny, and the response reveals everything. Chapter 2. The Hidden Insecurity Engine. If you only study the surface of narcissism, you will misunderstand it. You will see arrogance. You will see entitlement. You will see superiority, and you will assume strength. But narcissistic behavior is not powered by strength. It is powered by instability. The core of narcissism is not confidence. It is a fractured self-concept, and a fractured self-concept cannot tolerate exposure, so it builds a defense system. That defense system becomes personality, the false self-construction. Healthy identity develops gradually, through experience, through failure, through accountability, through self-reflection. It integrates strengths and weaknesses. A narcissistic identity does not integrate weakness. It rejects it. Instead of accepting imperfection, it constructs a false self. The false self is exceptional, admired, superior, untouchable. This self-image is not aspirational. It is protective, because without it, the individual feels psychologically small, insignificant, invisible, unworthy. Those feelings are intolerable, so they are buried. And in their place, grandiosity is installed. Grandiosity as compensation. Grandiosity is not random, it is compensation. When a person feels deeply insecure, they may compensate by exaggerating power. When someone feels internally inadequate, they may project superiority externally. The louder the superiority, the more fragile the foundation. This is why narcissists often overreact to small criticism. Because criticism does not simply challenge behavior, it threatens identity. And identity must be defended at all costs. The hypersensitivity to shame. At the center of narcissism is shame, not ordinary embarrassment, but deep identity level shame. Shame says, I am not enough. Narcissism cannot tolerate that message, so it converts shame into blame, anger, deflection, attack. If you criticize a narcissist, you are not challenging an idea. You are activating buried shame, and shame feels dangerous. So the nervous system reacts aggressively. What looks like ego is often fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of being seen as ordinary. Fear of being seen as flawed. The emotional fragility beneath dominance. From the outside, narcissists appear emotionally strong. They seem unaffected, unbothered, composed. But this is surface regulation. Internally, they are highly reactive. Small slights feel large. Minor disagreements feel threatening. Neutral feedback feels insulting. Why? Because their identity is externally stabilized. They do not possess stable internal self-worth. They require praise, recognition, attention, status reinforcement. Without external validation, their internal structure weakens, and instability creates anxiety. Validation as psychological oxygen. Attention is not pleasant for a narcissist. It is necessary. Validation functions as emotional oxygen. Compliments regulate insecurity. Admiration stabilizes identity. Recognition reduces shame. This is why narcissists often steer conversations back to themselves, exaggerate achievements, interrupt to correct others, seek spotlight positions. It is not always about ego pleasure. It is about identity survival. Without validation, the false self begins to collapse. The fear of ordinary. One of the most destabilizing experiences for a narcissistic personality is feeling ordinary. Ordinary feels like invisibility. Invisible feels like insignificance. Insignificance feels like psychological death. So they avoid environments where they are not exceptional. If someone else outshines them, competition activates. If someone receives praise, jealousy emerges. If attention shifts away, withdrawal or disruption may occur, because superiority must be maintained, not occasionally, constantly. Early development patterns. Many narcissistic patterns begin early. Children who receive excessive admiration without grounding, or harsh criticism without emotional safety, may struggle to build stable identity. If a child is only valued for achievement, they may equate love with performance. If a child is shamed for weakness, they may reject vulnerability entirely. If a child is praised unrealistically, they may internalize inflated self-perception without internal structure to support it. Narcissism often emerges as adaptation to unstable emotional environments. It is not random. It is protective architecture. Why they cannot admit fault. Admitting fault threatens the false self. If they are wrong, the superior narrative cracks. If the narrative cracks, shame rises. If shame rises, defense activates. So instead of saying, "I was wrong," they may say, "You misunderstood. You are overreacting. That's not what happened. You are too sensitive." This is not always conscious manipulation. It is identity preservation. Fault equals threat. Threat equals defense. Defense equals distortion, emotional black and white thinking. Narcissistic insecurity creates polarized thinking. People are either admiring or attacking, loyal or betraying, useful or disposable. This binary perception stabilizes control. Nuance introduces uncertainty. Uncertainty introduces vulnerability, so complexity is avoided. If someone questions them, they may become the enemy. If someone praises them, they become valuable. Relationships are filtered through utility, not mutuality. Why they appear so convincing? The insecurity engine does not make them weak in presentation. It makes them relentless. Because maintaining superiority is survival level urgent, they rehearse narratives, refine image, perfect social presentation, study power dynamics. The drive to protect identity often creates strong external performance, which is why they can appear charismatic, competent, magnetic. The insecurity fuels effort, but the effort is not for growth. It is for preservation, internal emptiness. Behind the performance there is often emptiness. Because the false self dominates identity, authentic self-development stalls. If everything is about image, internal growth becomes secondary. This creates emotional shallowness, empathy deficits, difficulty forming deep bonds. Intimacy requires vulnerability. Vulnerability threatens the mask, so intimacy remains superficial. Strategic insight. When you understand the insecurity engine, you stop being confused by contradictions. You stop asking, "How can someone so confident be so defensive?" Because you see, the confidence is armor, the defensiveness is fear, the dominance is compensation, the control is stabilization. Narcissism is not simply ego, it is fear wearing superiority, and fear fights hard to survive. We have now built the internal engine. Chapter 3. The love bombing phase. Narcissistic control rarely begins with dominance. It begins with elevation, before the criticism, before the withdrawal, before the subtle manipulation. There is idealization. You are not immediately diminished. You are amplified, and amplification is addictive. The sudden intensity. Love bombing is not ordinary affection. It is accelerated intimacy. The narcissist studies you quickly, your insecurities, your aspirations, your vulnerabilities, your unmet emotional needs. Then they mirror them back to you. They say, "I've never met someone like you. You understand me better than anyone. I feel connected to you instantly." The speed feels extraordinary. It feels rare. It feels destined. But intensity is not intimacy. Intensity is stimulation. Intimacy requires time. Mirroring as attachment engineering. One of the most powerful tools during love bombing is mirroring. They adopt your interests, agree with your values, align with your ambitions, reflect your emotional language. This creates the illusion of perfect compatibility. You feel seen, you feel understood, you feel special, but the connection is constructed, not organic. Mirroring creates rapid bonding because it reduces perceived difference. Difference creates distance. Similarity creates attachment. The narcissist reduces distance strategically. The idealization trap. During this phase, you are not just appreciated, you are idealized. Your strengths are exaggerated. Your flaws are minimized. Your presence is elevated. You become the perfect partner, the perfect friend, the perfect ally. This feels empowering, but idealization is unstable, because no human can sustain perfection. Eventually, you will disappoint the narrative. And when you do, the shift begins. Why love bombing feels so powerful? The human brain is wired for reward. Rapid praise triggers dopamine. Intense attention triggers validation. Exclusivity triggers attachment. The combination creates emotional dependency. You are not just receiving affection, you are receiving chemical reinforcement. And because the reinforcement is intense, it feels rare. Rare experiences feel valuable. Valuable experiences feel worth protecting. You begin investing emotionally, sometimes before noticing. The illusion of destiny. Narcissistic love bombing often includes language of fate. "We were meant to meet. I've never felt this before. This is different." These statements elevate the relationship into mythology. Mythology overrides caution. Caution feels cynical. And when something feels extraordinary, You do not want to question it. You want to preserve it. This accelerates commitment. Future faking. During love bombing, future promises appear quickly. Plans, visions, shared ambitions. You and I will build something incredible. We'll travel everywhere. I see a future with you. The future becomes part of the attachment. You begin bonding not just to the person, but to the projected narrative. Even if that narrative has no structural foundation. The speed of escalation. Healthy attachment grows in stages. First, interest, next curiosity, gradual trust, shared experience and deepening connection. Love bombing bypasses stages. It jumps directly to intensity, and intensity can override discernment, because speed feels like passion. But speed is also strategy. If attachment forms before evaluation, control becomes easier later. The dependency foundation. Love bombing is not only about admiration, it is about establishing dependency. You begin associating emotional highs with this person. They become the source of validation, excitement, affection, and stimulation. When they withdraw later, the contrast feels devastating, and that contrast deepens control, because you chase the return of the high. The first subtle shift, the transition from idealization to control, is rarely dramatic. It begins with subtle corrections, small criticisms disguised as jokes, mild withdrawal of attention, inconsistent praise. You notice something is different, but because the early phase was so intense, you rationalize the change. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe I am overthinking. The memory of idealization keeps you invested. You want the earlier version back, so you adjust your behavior. This is the first layer of compliance, the psychological hook. The hook is not love. It is intermittent reinforcement. Inconsistent reward is more addictive than consistent reward. When praise becomes unpredictable, you work harder for it. When attention becomes conditional, you try to earn it. The brain becomes focused on regaining the high, and focus increases attachment. Why smart people fall for it? Love bombing does not target weakness. It targets human wiring. Everyone wants to feel special. Everyone wants to feel deeply understood. Everyone wants intense connection. The narcissist simply accelerates the process. The issue is not intelligence, it is pace. When something moves too fast, evaluation cannot keep up. Strategic insight. If admiration feels overwhelming, pause. If intensity feels disproportionate, observe. If someone elevates you unrealistically, watch for future contrast. Healthy admiration respects time. Manipulative admiration compresses it, because attachment formed quickly is easier to destabilize later, and destabilization increases control. We have now established the mask, the insecurity engine, and the attachment trap. Next, we will look at gaslighting and perception distortion. This is where psychological control deepens. Now we move into the phase where confusion replaces clarity, where you begin questioning not the narcissist, but yourself. This is where psychological control becomes invisible. Chapter 4. Gaslighting and perception distortion. Control is most powerful when it does not look like control. It looks like misunderstanding. It sounds like correction. It feels like self-doubt. Gaslighting is not simply lying. It is the systematic erosion of your trust in your own perception. And when perception weakens, dependence strengthens. The shift from idealization to instability. After the love bombing phase, the narcissist has secured emotional attachment. You are invested. You care. You want harmony. Now control can begin subtly. It starts small. A comment is dismissed. A memory is reframed. An emotion is minimized. You say, "That hurt me." They respond, "You are being too sensitive." You say, "You promised that." They reply, "That's not what I meant." These statements do not appear aggressive, but they shift the focus. The issue is no longer their behavior. It is your reaction. This is the beginning of perception distortion, the rewriting of events. Gaslighting thrives in ambiguity. The narcissist reframes events with confidence. "That never happened. You misunderstood. You are remembering it wrong." The key is certainty. They deliver distortion calmly, confidently, without hesitation. The more composed the denial, the more destabilized you feel, because humans calibrate memory socially. If someone speaks with enough certainty, you begin doubting your recall. Especially if you already care about the relationship, doubt becomes the first fracture. Emotional minimization. Another subtle tactic is emotional invalidation. You express concern. They respond, "You are overreacting. You are dramatic. You always take things the wrong way." Notice the pattern. The behavior is not addressed. Your emotional response becomes the problem. This shifts accountability away from them and onto you. Over time, you begin censoring your reactions. You question your instincts. You suppress discomfort, and suppression increases control, confusion as strategy. When clarity disappears, dependence increases. Gaslighting introduces uncertainty deliberately. Statements are vague enough to deny later. Promises are implied, but never confirmed. Conversations are ambiguous. Ambiguity allows retroactive reinterpretation. You assume that's not what I meant. You twisted my words. Clarity is stability. Ambiguity is leverage. The erosion of confidence. Gaslighting is not designed to win arguments. It is designed to erode confidence. If you no longer trust your perception, you seek external confirmation. And who becomes the source of that confirmation? The narcissist. They position themselves as the authority of reality. Your memory becomes questionable. Their interpretation becomes dominant. Now hierarchy is established, not through force, through destabilization, projection, and blame reversal. A powerful layer of gaslighting is projection. They accuse you of what they are doing. If they are dismissive, they call you cold. If they lie, they accuse you of dishonesty. If they manipulate, they label you controlling. Projection shifts suspicion. And because you are emotionally invested, you analyze yourself. You look inward. You attempt correction. Meanwhile, their behavior remains unexamined. The psychological toll. Over time, you experience self-doubt, anxiety, hyper-vigilance, confusion, emotional fatigue. You begin rehearsing conversations in your mind. You anticipate misinterpretation. You second-guess memory. This cognitive strain weakens resistance, because clarity requires mental stability, and gaslighting destabilizes that foundation. The public versus private divide. One of the most disorienting elements is the contrast between public and private behavior. In public, the narcissist appears calm, reasonable, charismatic. In private, they distort, dismiss, reframe. If you attempt to explain this dynamic to others, you encounter disbelief. But they seem so nice. This isolates you. Isolation increases dependence. Dependence increases control. The gradual nature of the shift. Gaslighting rarely begins intensely. It begins incrementally. A joke here, a denial there, a subtle correction. Because if distortion were obvious, you would resist. Gradual change is harder to detect. Like temperature rising slowly, you adapt before noticing discomfort. Why it works on intelligent people. Gaslighting does not target ignorance. It targets self-reflection. Intelligent people often assume misunderstanding first. They give benefit of the doubt. They analyze their own behavior. This introspection becomes exploitable. Because the narcissist does not introspect equally, the imbalance creates asymmetry. You question yourself. They protect themselves. The breaking point. Eventually, reality becomes unstable. You ask yourself, am I imagining this? Why do I always feel wrong? Why does every conflict end with me apologizing? That is the moment gaslighting has taken hold. Because you are no longer evaluating behavior objectively. You are evaluating yourself. And control has shifted fully. Strategic insight. Gaslighting survives on unchallenged ambiguity. To resist it, you must anchor clarity. Document conversations. Reconfirm details. Separate facts from interpretation. Most importantly, trust patterns over isolated incidents. One misunderstanding is normal. Repeated reality distortion is structural, and structure reveals intent. We have now crossed the line from attraction to destabilization. Next, we look at emotional supply and validation addiction. This is where you understand why the narcissist cannot stop. We move to the fuel source. Because narcissistic control is not random, it is powered, and what powers it is not dominance, it is supply. Chapter 5. Emotional supply and validation addiction. At the core of narcissistic behavior lies a constant hunger, not for love, not for connection, but for validation. Validation is not a preference, it is regulation. Without it, the internal structure destabilizes. With it, the false self survives. What is narcissistic supply? Narcissistic supply is attention that reinforces superiority. It can come in many forms: praise, admiration, obedience, envy, fear, status recognition. Even negative attention can serve as supply if it confirms significance, because insignificance is the real threat. If you react strongly, you confirm importance. If you admire deeply, you confirm superiority. If you fear them, you confirm power. All of these regulate insecurity. Why attention is oxygen. Most people enjoy validation, but they can function without constant reinforcement. Narcissists struggle too, because their identity is externally stabilized. If the environment reflects admiration, they feel stable. If the environment reflects indifference, anxiety rises. If the environment reflects criticism, defense activates. Supply is not luxury, it is maintenance. The addiction pattern. Supply operates like intermittent reinforcement. When admiration flows freely, they feel powerful. When it slows, they intensify behavior to restore it. They may boast more, seek spotlight, create conflict, withdraw to provoke reaction, manufacture drama. Drama generates attention. Attention restores supply. This cycle can become addictive. Emotional provocation as strategy. Sometimes narcissists provoke intentionally, not because they enjoy conflict, but because conflict guarantees attention. Silence threatens invisibility. Invisibility threatens identity, so they may criticize unexpectedly, create tension, introduce comparison, withdraw affection. When you react, supply returns. Your emotional energy feeds the system, the comparison mechanism. Another supply source is comparison. If they can position themselves above others, superiority is reinforced. They may compare you to others, or compare themselves favorably. Other people aren't as capable as I am. You are lucky I chose you. No one else would tolerate this. Comparison maintains hierarchy. Hierarchy stabilizes identity. Social media, amplification. Modern environments intensify supply. Public praise, visible status, follow accounts, likes. External metrics become identity reinforcement, and when metrics fluctuate, emotional instability may increase, because identity is attached to visibility. Visibility equals validation. Validation equals stability. Devaluation after supply saturation. Once a narcissist feels secure in your attachment, the dynamic shifts. The intensity of love bombing decreases. Criticism increases. Attention becomes inconsistent. Why? Because admiration loses novelty, and novelty stimulates supply. So they may seek new sources, or destabilize existing ones. Devaluation creates insecurity in you. Your insecurity increases pursuit. Your pursuit increases supply. Why they cannot be fully satisfied. Supply does not build internal stability. It temporarily masks instability. So the need returns, stronger, more urgent. This creates chronic dissatisfaction. Even when admired, they may feel empty, because admiration does not heal insecurity. It only quiets it. Briefly, the role of envy. Envy is central to narcissistic supply dynamics. If someone else receives admiration, it threatens hierarchy. They may dismiss that person, undermine their success, shift attention, reclaim spotlight, because someone else's elevation feels like their diminishment. Scarcity mentality governs identity. Only one can be superior. The exhaustion of the partner. If you are in relationship with a narcissist, you may feel drained because you are constantly supplying reassurance, praise, attention, emotional energy, and the supply threshold keeps rising. What once satisfied them no longer does. You give more, they demand more. The imbalance grows. Intermittent reinforcement and bonding. The most powerful hook is inconsistency. Sometimes they are warm, sometimes distant, sometimes admiring, sometimes critical. The unpredictability increases emotional focus. You begin analyzing behavior, seeking patterns, trying to restore the earlier high. This creates attachment anxiety. Anxiety increases pursuit. Pursuit increases supply. Why they fear independence. If you become emotionally independent, supply weakens. If you detach, validation decreases. If you establish boundaries, control reduces. So they may respond with charm, intimidation, guilt, withdrawal. Whatever restores supply fastest, because autonomy in others feels like abandonment, and abandonment activates insecurity. Strategic insight. When you understand supply, you stop personalizing the dynamic. It is not about your worth. it is about their regulation. If they elevate you, it is supply extraction. If they devalue you, it is supply recalibration. If they provoke you, it is supply activation. Your emotional reaction is currency, and currency sustains the system. We now understand the mask, the insecurity engine, the attachment trap, the perception distortion, the supply addiction. Next, you will see what their triangulation and social manipulation looks like. This is where their control extends beyond one-on-one dynamics. It moves beyond the private dynamic, because narcissistic control does not stay contained between two people. It expands, it recruits, it restructures the social environment itself. Chapter 6. Triangulation and social manipulation. If gaslighting destabilizes your perception internally, triangulation destabilizes your position externally. It introduces a third party, a comparison, a threat, an audience, a replacement, a competitor, and suddenly you are no longer interacting in a straight line. You are interacting inside a psychological triangle. What is triangulation? Triangulation occurs when a narcissist brings a third person into the dynamic to create tension, insecurity, or competition. This third person may be an ex, a colleague, a sibling, a friend, a stranger, even an abstract other. The goal is not connection. The goal is pressure, because pressure creates emotional movement, and emotional movement produces supply. The comparison strategy. One of the most common forms of triangulation is comparison. Other people appreciate me more. My ex never questioned me like this. Everyone else agrees with me. Notice what happens. The issue shifts. Now you are not discussing behavior. You are defending your value. Comparison creates insecurity. Insecurity increases compliance. Because you want to restore your position. You want to win back superiority in the dynamic. Manufactured competition. Sometimes triangulation is subtle. They may mention someone who admires them, casually, repeatedly, without direct accusation. The implication is enough. If you don't appreciate me, someone else will. This triggers scarcity psychology. Scarcity increases urgency. Urgency increases emotional investment. You become more attentive, more reactive, more compliant. Social proof as control. Triangulation often uses social proof. Everyone thinks you are overreacting. My friends agree with me. People say I deserve better, even if vague, even if unverified. The illusion of majority creates pressure. Humans are wired to conform to group consensus. If you believe others see you negatively, self-doubt increases, and doubt weakens resistance. Reputation management. Narcissists often cultivate strong external images: charming, competent, generous, helpful. This makes triangulation more effective, because if conflict arises, others may instinctively side with them. Your credibility weakens, their credibility strengthens. This creates isolation. Isolation increases dependence. Dependence increases control, dividing and conquering. In family or workplace systems, triangulation becomes structural. They may tell different people different stories, shift narratives, create misunderstandings, encourage subtle rivalries. When people are divided, unity dissolves, and divided individuals are easier to manage, because coordination requires clarity, and triangulation disrupts clarity. The public praise versus private criticism split. Another powerful tactic is selective admiration. They may praise someone publicly while criticizing you privately, or vice versa. This creates instability. You question your standing. You attempt to regain favor, and the narcissist becomes the gatekeeper of approval. Approval becomes conditional. Conditional approval increases anxiety. Anxiety increases pursuit. The replacement threat. In relationships, triangulation often includes the replacement narrative. If this doesn't work, I'll find someone else, sometimes explicit, sometimes implied. This creates fear of abandonment. Fear increases compliance. You adjust behavior to avoid loss. Loss feels catastrophic, because earlier love bombing created high attachment. Workplace triangulation. In professional settings, triangulation may look like, I spoke with leadership about this. Your colleague handled this better. I have other team members who don't question direction. Now authority and comparison merge. You feel evaluated, measured, replaceable. Performance anxiety increases, and anxiety reduces assertiveness. The psychological effect. Triangulation produces insecurity, competition, isolation, self-doubt, hyper Awareness. Your attention shifts away from the narcissist's behavior and toward your status. Am I good enough? Am I valued? Am I being replaced? This shift is strategic, because while you defend your position, they maintain control. Why it works so well? Humans are tribal. We fear exclusion. Exclusion historically meant danger. So any signal of replacement or social rejection activates deep survival wiring. Triangulation exploits this instinct. It makes belonging feel conditional, and conditional belonging increases obedience. The hidden objective. Triangulation is not about the third person. It is about emotional destabilization. If you feel secure, you are harder to control. If you feel compared, you are easier to influence. The triangle keeps you off balance, and imbalance benefits the manipulator. Strategic insight. When you notice triangulation, pause. Refuse comparison as currency. Do not compete for validation. Do not chase approval. Clarity dissolves triangles. If someone introduces a third party to create pressure, redirect the conversation back to direct accountability. Healthy dynamics are linear. Manipulative dynamics are triangular, and triangles are designed to create imbalance. We have now expanded control into the social field. Next on the radar is the silent treatment and withdrawal strategy. This is where absence becomes a weapon, where we move from pressure to punishment, into one of the most psychologically destabilizing tactics in narcissistic dynamics. Not aggression, not shouting, not confrontation, absence. Because sometimes control is not exerted through intensity, but through withdrawal. Chapter 7. The silent treatment and withdrawal strategy. Silence, in healthy relationships, can be space. In narcissistic dynamics, silence can be punishment. It is not accidental, it is strategic, and its power lies in ambiguity. Because when someone withdraws without explanation, your mind fills the gap. And what the mind creates under uncertainty is rarely calm. The sudden withdrawal. After conflict, even minor conflict, a narcissist may abruptly pull away. Communication slows. Responses shorten. Affection disappears. Warmth vanishes. No discussion. No closure. No resolution. Just distance. And distance activates anxiety. Because attachment formed during love, bombing created emotional dependency. Now that dependency is threatened, why silence is so powerful? Humans are wired to resolve tension. When connection is disrupted, the nervous system seeks repair. If someone withdraws, you instinctively attempt to restore harmony. You reach out, you apologize, you adjust, even if you did nothing wrong, because discomfort feels urgent. Silence creates discomfort, and discomfort creates compliance. Emotional uncertainty is leverage. The silent treatment creates psychological instability. You do not know. Are they angry? Are they done? Are they planning something? Are they punishing me? Uncertainty consumes attention. Attention equals energy. Energy fuels the dynamic. The narcissist does not need to argue. They simply withhold, and you move toward them. Conditional affection. Silence teaches you something implicitly. Approval is conditional. Connection is conditional. Affection is conditional. And the condition is compliance. If you align, warmth returns. If you resist, distance remains. This pattern trains behavior without direct instruction. The push-pull dynamic. The withdrawal strategy often alternates with sudden warmth. Cold, then warm. Distant, then affectionate. This unpredictability increases attachment because intermittent reinforcement is neurologically addictive. The brain focuses intensely on restoring positive states. When warmth returns, relief feels powerful, and relief reinforces the bond. Even though the relief is from distress they created, punishment without accountability. The silent treatment avoids direct conflict. It allows the narcissist to punish without admitting fault. They can claim, "I just needed space. I don't want to argue. I am tired of drama." But the timing reveals intention. Space is healthy when communicated. Withdrawal is manipulative when used to control. The difference is clarity. Emotional isolation. Extended silence creates emotional isolation. You may feel abandoned, rejected, invisible. This can activate deep attachment fears, especially if you already formed dependency during earlier phases. The narcissist understands, consciously or unconsciously, that fear increases pursuit, and pursuit restores supply. The power of indifference. One of the most destabilizing signals for a narcissist is indifference. If you do not chase, the dynamic shifts. If you remain calm, the power of silence weakens, because the silent treatment depends on reaction, no leverage. This is why narcissists may escalate if silence does not produce response. They may reappear dramatically, create new conflict, introduce triangulation, shift tactics, because silence without effect threatens control. Public silence versus private silence. Sometimes withdrawal is visible only to you. In public, they appear normal. In private, they are cold. This duality increases confusion. You question, is it me? Am I imagining distance? Gaslighting may follow. You are making things up. I am acting normal. This compounds destabilization, the emotional conditioning effect. Over time, you may begin avoiding conflict entirely. You suppress concerns. You hesitate to speak honestly. You prioritize harmony over truth, because you want to avoid silence. This is behavioral conditioning. Silence becomes deterrent, and deterrence shapes compliance. The deeper engine. Remember the insecurity engine. Withdrawal is also protection. If a narcissist feels criticized, they may withdraw to avoid shame. Distance reduces exposure. But instead of admitting hurt, they impose silence. This preserves superiority. They are not rejected. They are choosing distance. The narrative remains intact. Strategic insight. Silence is powerful only when it triggers fear. If you understand the pattern, you remove its mystery. If someone withdraws intentionally to punish, do not reward it with desperation. Calmness interrupts conditioning. Clarity restores balance. Healthy relationships resolve conflict directly. Manipulative relationships weaponize absence, and absence can feel louder than words. We have now explored the mask, the insecurity engine, love, bombing, gaslighting, supply addiction, triangulation, withdrawal, image management, and public persona control is the next context we will be looking at. This is where we analyze why narcissists look perfect to everyone else. One of the most confusing parts of narcissistic dynamics, because this is where your private experience collides with public perception, and the contradiction destabilizes you. Chapter 8. Image Management and Public Persona Control. One of the most powerful weapons in narcissistic control is reputation, not their behavior in private, their image in public, because if the world sees them as admirable, your doubt becomes isolated, and isolation weakens resistance. The two personas. Narcissists often operate with dual presentation. 1. Private persona. This include critical, dismissive, controlling, emotionally unpredictable. 2. Public persona. It include charming, helpful, confident, composed. This split is not accidental. It is strategic identity architecture, because control works best when credibility is protected. Why public image matters so much? Remember the insecurity engine. Superiority must be maintained, and public admiration stabilizes identity. If others see them as competent, successful, kind, powerful, their internal narrative survives. But image also serves another purpose: protection from exposure. If conflict arises, outsiders default to the public persona. Are you sure? They don't seem like that. They've always been great to me. Now you begin doubting yourself. Again, gaslighting becomes socially reinforced. Social investment strategy. Narcissists often invest heavily in surface relationships, networking, visibility, social positioning. They build alliances, not always for connection, but for insulation. Because the more social capital they hold, the harder it becomes to challenge them. Reputation becomes armor. Selective generosity. Public generosity is powerful branding. They may help publicly, praise strategically, offer visible support, but generosity often has an audience. It reinforces the identity of, I am admirable. The audience confirms it, and confirmation equals supply. The controlled narrative. When conflict emerges, they control the story. They frame themselves as misunderstood, victimized, unappreciated. Subtle narrative shaping occurs before you realize it. By the time you speak, others have already heard their version, and their version sounds calmer, more rational, more structured, because they prepared it. The isolation effect. When your experience does not match public perception, you may feel confused, alone, invalidated. You hesitate to share concerns, because if everyone admires them, maybe you are the problem. That hesitation strengthens control. Isolation increases dependency. Dependency increases compliance. Why they rarely explode publicly. Public emotional collapse threatens image, so they regulate better in visible settings. They save volatility for private spaces. This selective regulation creates plausible deniability. If I were really that way, wouldn't others see it? This logic traps you because the duality feels unbelievable. The reputation shield. If you confront them publicly, they may appear calm, rational, measured. You may appear emotional, reactive. The contrast reinforces their image. They understand optics, and optics influence perception. Perception shapes credibility. Credibility shapes power. Workplace image dynamics. In professional environments, image management becomes more structured. They may take credit subtly, highlight achievements publicly, reframe team contributions, minimize mistakes strategically. If they control visibility, they control narrative. And if they control narrative, they control hierarchy. Romantic relationship dynamics. In personal relationships, they may portray themselves as devoted, patient, long-suffering. If conflict escalates, they frame it as your instability. Because public sympathy stabilizes identity, you feel silenced. They feel reinforced. Why this is so disorienting. Humans rely on social feedback for reality calibration. If multiple people see someone positively, you assume your experience is incorrect. This creates internal cognitive conflict. Am I wrong? Why am I the only one noticing this? This doubt weakens confidence, and weakened confidence increases control. The image addiction. Image management is not only defensive, it is addictive. Public admiration feels powerful. Being perceived as exceptional reinforces superiority. So they invest in image continuously, because image is not accessory. It is survival mechanism. Strategic insight. When evaluating behavior, separate public persona from private pattern. Charm does not equal character. Reputation does not equal integrity. Observe consistency across environments. Healthy personalities are coherent. Narcissistic personalities are curated, and curation always requires maintenance. Maintenance reveals fragility. We now understand why they look admirable, why you feel confused, why exposure feels impossible. Now you've come this far. It is time we look at the most powerful tactics of the narcissist: projection and blame reversal. This is where accountability disappears entirely. We go deeper into their distortion mechanics. Now we move into one of the most destabilizing and psychologically sophisticated mechanisms in narcissistic dynamics, because at this stage control is no longer about admiration or silence. It is about inversion. Reality flips, responsibility shifts, and you slowly begin carrying weight that does not belong to you. Chapter 9. Projection and blame reversal. If gaslighting distorts your perception of events, projection distorts your perception of yourself. It is not just denial, it is displacement. The narcissist takes what is intolerable within themselves and assigns it to you. And if you are not aware of the pattern, you begin defending against accusations that were never yours to begin with. What projection really is? Projection is a defense mechanism. When a trait, flaw, or behavior threatens the narcissist's self-image, it cannot be integrated. Remember the false self: superior, controlled, rational, impeccable. Anything that contradicts this image must be expelled. So instead of admitting, "I am insecure," they say, "You are insecure." Instead of admitting, "I am manipulative," they say, "You are trying to control me." Instead of admitting, "I am emotionally unstable," they say, "You are too emotional." The unacceptable trait is relocated away from them, onto you. Why projection feels so convincing? Projection works because it is delivered with confidence. They do not sound unsure, they sound certain, and certainty influences perception. If someone accuses you strongly enough, you begin searching yourself for evidence, especially if you are introspective, especially if you care about the relationship. You begin asking, am I being controlling? Am I too sensitive? Did I cause this? And once you are analyzing yourself, control has shifted. Blame reversal, the final twist. Projection often escalates into blame reversal. If you confront them about hurtful behavior, they respond by accusing you. You say, "You lied to me." They respond, "You never trust me." You say, "That felt dismissive." They respond, You are always attacking me. The focus moves from their behavior to your character, and now you are defending yourself instead of holding them accountable. The Darvo pattern. There is a recognizable structure in narcissistic blame reversal. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Deny the behavior, attack your credibility. Reverse roles so they become the victim. I didn't do that. You are paranoid. I can't believe you'd accuse me like this. Now you feel guilty. You may even apologize, and the original issue disappears. Emotional exhaustion through defense. Projection forces you into constant self-defense. You justify, explain, clarify, apologize. Meanwhile, they avoid reflection entirely. The energy imbalance grows. You feel drained. They feel stabilized, because every defense you offer reinforces their narrative. The character assassination layer. When projection intensifies, it becomes identity attack. You are selfish. You are manipulative. You are unstable. If repeated enough, these accusations begin to echo internally. You begin filtering your behavior through their lens. Am I selfish? Am I unstable? The more you question yourself, the less you question them. And that is the objective. Why they cannot self-reflect. Projection is not random cruelty. It is psychological protection. Admitting fault activates shame. Shame destabilizes the false self. So, instead of processing guilt, they externalize it. If someone must be flawed, it cannot be them. It must be you. This preserves identity, but it destroys relational balance. Projection in subtle forms. Not all projection is aggressive. Sometimes it appears as concern. I just think you need help. You seem stressed lately. I worry about your emotional reactions. The tone may be calm, but the implication is clear. You are the problem, not the dynamic, not the behavior. You. This subtle reframing is powerful because it feels reasonable. Public projection. Projection can also be externalized socially. They may portray you as difficult, emotional, unstable, unreasonable. Before you realize it, others have heard the narrative. Now when conflict surfaces, people already see you through their lens. Your credibility weakens. Their control strengthens. The internalization trap. The most dangerous outcome of projection is internalization. When you begin believing the accusations, when you adapt behavior to avoid triggering labels, when you silence yourself to avoid being too much. At that point, control no longer requires active manipulation. You self-regulate. You self-censor. You self-correct. In their favor. The emotional confusion loop. Projection creates circular conflict. You defend. They escalate. You apologize. They stabilize. Then the cycle repeats. Over time you may feel confused, exhausted, uncertain of your own character. This confusion is not accidental. It is structural, because clarity would expose imbalance. Strategic insight. Projection loses power when you stop absorbing it. Not every accusation requires defense. Not every emotional charge belongs to you. When someone consistently accuses you of traits that mirror their behavior, observe the pattern. Patterns reveal displacement. Healthy individuals can admit fault. Narcissistic structures redirect it, and redirection is the shield, protecting the fragile core. We have now dismantled the mask, the insecurity engine, love, bombing, gaslighting, supply addiction, triangulation, withdrawal, image management, projection. Next, we move into the control zone. This is where control structural conditioning becomes normalized. We move into one of the most dangerous parts of narcissistic control, not because it is dramatic, but because it is slow, gradual, almost invisible. This is where control becomes normalized, where what once felt unacceptable begins to feel routine. Chapter 10. Boundary testing and gradual escalation. No narcissistic dynamic begins with full control. It begins with a test, a small one, so small you might dismiss it, because if control were immediate, you would resist. But if it grows slowly, you adapt, and adaptation is the key. The first micro-test. Boundary testing begins with something minor, a joke at your expense, a subtle criticism, a dismissive comment, a small broken promise. You notice it, but you rationalize it. It's not that serious. They didn't mean it. I am overthinking. That rationalization is the opening. Because the narcissist is watching, not consciously in every case, but behaviorally, they observe your tolerance. If you say nothing, the boundary expands. The tolerance calibration. Narcissistic personalities often calibrate behavior gradually. They push slightly, Then observe your response. If you confront directly and firmly, they may retreat temporarily. If you hesitate, they push further. Over time, your tolerance becomes the new baseline. What once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. Incremental disrespect. Escalation is rarely explosive. It is layered. A raised voice, then a sharper tone, then direct dismissal, then open contempt. Each step builds upon the previous one. And because the increase is small each time, your nervous system adapts. You remember the earlier idealization. You compare current behavior not to healthy standards, but to the previous stage. At least it's not as bad as before. This comparative reasoning traps you, redefining acceptable behavior. Gradual escalation works because it shifts standards. The line moves, not suddenly, slowly. If someone once responded warmly and now responds coldly, you may accept coldness because it is not hostility. If someone once insulted harshly and now insults lightly, you may accept light insults because they are less extreme. The benchmark becomes distorted, the apology reset. After escalation peaks, there may be an apology, not always sincere, but enough to reset hope. I didn't mean that. I was stressed. I'll do better. This resets emotional memory. It softens resistance. And when behavior stabilizes briefly, you feel relief. Relief strengthens attachment. Then escalation resumes. The conditioning cycle. This pattern creates conditioning. Discomfort, escalation, withdrawal, apology, relief, repeat. Over time, you stop reacting to small violations. You conserve energy. You choose peace over confrontation. And the narcissist interprets this as permission. The financial and social expansion. Boundary testing may extend into other domains. Control over time, control over money, control over social interactions. It may begin subtly. Why do you need to see them? Do you really need that? You should prioritize me. At first, it sounds like preference. Later, it becomes expectation, then requirement. Isolation increases. Dependence increases. Control consolidates. The identity shift. One of the most subtle escalations is identity modification. They may reshape how you see yourself. You are not as independent as you think. You are too emotional to handle that. You need me to guide you. If repeated, these suggestions can shift self-perception. And when self-perception shifts, boundaries weaken internally. You may begin asking permission for things you once decided confidently. Why gradual escalation is so effective? Because humans adapt. We normalize environment, even unhealthy ones, especially if positive moments still exist. Hope sustains endurance, and endurance allows escalation. If the dynamic were entirely negative, you would leave. But because it is inconsistent, you stay. The contrast with healthy dynamics. Healthy relationships respect boundaries when expressed. They may negotiate. They may misunderstand, but they adjust. Narcissistic dynamics test boundaries repeatedly, not to understand them, but to move them, because fixed boundaries limit control. Flexible boundaries expand it. The internal dialogue trap. During escalation, you may find yourself thinking, maybe I am too rigid. Maybe I should compromise more. Relationships require sacrifice. Compromise is healthy when mutual. It becomes harmful when unilateral. If you are the only one adjusting, that is not compromise. That is conditioning. Strategic insight. The most powerful defense against gradual escalation is early clarity. Small violations matter, because small violations establish precedent. If something feels uncomfortable repeatedly, observe the pattern. Patterns predict trajectory. If escalation is consistent, it will continue, unless interrupted. Gradual control only succeeds when tolerated, and tolerance becomes permission. We now understand attachment, destabilization, supply, social manipulation, withdrawal, projection, escalation. So why do smart, strong people still fall for narcissists? In the next chapter, we dismantle the myth of weakness. We dismantle one of the most damaging myths surrounding narcissistic dynamics. The myth that only weak people fall for narcissists. That only naive people get entangled. That intelligence protects you. It doesn't. And understanding why is critical. Chapter 10. Boundary testing and gradual escalation. No narcissistic dynamic begins with full control. It begins with a test. A small one. So small you might dismiss it. Because if control were immediate, you would resist. But if it grows slowly, you adapt. And adaptation is the key. The first micro test. Boundary testing begins with something minor, A joke at your expense, a subtle criticism, a dismissive comment, a small broken promise. You notice it, but you rationalize it. It's not that serious. They didn't mean it. I am overthinking. That rationalization is the opening, because the narcissist is watching, not consciously in every case, but behaviorally. They observe your tolerance. If you say nothing, the boundary expands. The tolerance calibration. Narcissistic personalities often calibrate behavior gradually. They push slightly, then observe your response. If you confront directly and firmly, they may retreat temporarily. If you hesitate, they push further. Over time, your tolerance becomes the new baseline. What once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. Incremental disrespect. Escalation is rarely explosive. It is layered. A raised voice, then a sharper tone, then direct dismissal, then open contempt. Each step builds upon the previous one. And because the increase is small each time, your nervous system adapts. You remember the earlier idealization. You compare current behavior not to healthy standards, but to the previous stage. At least it's not as bad as before. This comparative reasoning traps you, redefining acceptable behavior. Gradual escalation works because it shifts standards. The line moves, not suddenly, slowly. If someone once responded warmly and now responds coldly, you may accept coldness because it is not hostility. If someone once insulted harshly and now insults lightly, you may accept light insults because they are less extreme. The benchmark becomes distorted, the apology reset. After escalation peaks, there may be an apology, not always sincere, but enough to reset hope. I didn't mean that. I was stressed. I'll do better. This resets emotional memory. It softens resistance. And when behavior stabilizes briefly, you feel relief. Relief strengthens attachment. Then escalation resumes. The conditioning cycle. This pattern creates conditioning, discomfort, escalation, withdrawal, apology, relief. Repeat. Over time, you stop reacting to small violations. You conserve energy. You choose peace over confrontation. And the narcissist interprets this as permission. The financial and social expansion. Boundary testing may extend into other domains. Control over time. Control over money. Control over social interactions. It may begin subtly. Why do you need to see them? Do you really need that? You should prioritize me. At first, it sounds like preference. Later, it becomes expectation, then requirement. Isolation increases, dependence increases, control consolidates. The identity shift. One of the most subtle escalations is identity modification. They may reshape how you see yourself. You are not as independent as you think. You are too emotional to handle that. You need me to guide you. If repeated, these suggestions can shift self-perception. And when self-perception shifts, boundaries weaken internally. You may begin asking permission for things you once decided confidently. Why gradual escalation is so effective? Because humans adapt. We normalize environment, even unhealthy ones, especially if positive moments still exist. Hope sustains endurance, and endurance allows escalation. If the dynamic were entirely negative, you would leave. But because it is inconsistent, you stay. The contrast with healthy dynamics. Healthy relationships respect boundaries when expressed. They may negotiate, they may misunderstand, but they adjust. Narcissistic dynamics test boundaries repeatedly, not to understand them, but to move them, because fixed boundaries limit control. Flexible boundaries expand it. The internal dialogue trap. During escalation, you may find yourself thinking, maybe I am too rigid, maybe I should compromise more. Relationships require sacrifice. Compromise is healthy when mutual. It becomes harmful when unilateral. If you are the only one adjusting, that is not compromise. That is conditioning. Strategic insight. The most powerful defense against gradual escalation is early clarity. Small violations matter, because small violations establish precedent. If something feels uncomfortable repeatedly, observe the pattern. Patterns predict trajectory. If escalation is consistent, it will continue, unless interrupted. Gradual control only succeeds when tolerated, and tolerance becomes permission. We now understand attachment, destabilization, supply, social manipulation, withdrawal, projection, escalation. So why do smart, strong people still fall for narcissists? In the next chapter, we dismantle the myth of weakness. We dismantle one of the most damaging myths surrounding narcissistic dynamics. The myth that only weak people fall for narcissists, that only naive people get entangled, that intelligence protects you. It doesn't, and understanding why is critical. Chapter 11. Why smart, strong people still fall for narcissists. If narcissistic control were obvious, it would rarely succeed. If it targeted ignorance, it would collapse under awareness. But narcissistic dynamics do not target stupidity, they target humanity, and often, they target strength. Intelligence is not immunity. Smart people overestimate their ability to detect manipulation. They assume, I would see it, I would know, I wouldn't tolerate that. But narcissistic control does not begin with control. It begins with admiration. It begins with mirroring. It begins with alignment. And intelligent people often value depth. They value connection. They value intensity, which makes love bombing especially powerful. The empathy advantage. Empathy is a strength, but in narcissistic dynamics, it becomes exploitable. Empathetic individuals give benefit of the doubt. Search for explanation. Consider context. Try to understand motives. When a narcissist behaves poorly, the empathetic person asks, are they stressed? Did I misunderstand? What happened to them? This self-questioning delays confrontation, and delay allows escalation. The fixer personality. Many strong individuals possess a problem-solving orientation. They see potential. They see wounds. They see complexity. And they believe growth is possible. If they detect insecurity beneath arrogance, they may feel compassion. I can help them. They just need stability. They've been hurt. But narcissistic insecurity is not healed through reassurance. It is stabilized through supply. The fixer becomes fuel. The high achiever trap. Narcissists are often attracted to capable individuals, confident, independent, successful. Why? Because controlling someone strong reinforces superiority. If they can destabilize someone competent, their power feels amplified. So they may initially elevate you, admire your intelligence, praise your strength, mirror your ambition, until attachment forms. Then the dynamic shifts. Cognitive dissonance. Smart people struggle with contradiction. When behavior conflicts with image, they seek resolution. He's so intelligent, he can't be manipulative. She's so charming, she can't be controlling. The mind tries to reconcile two realities, often by minimizing the negative one, because accepting manipulation means accepting misjudgment, and misjudgment threatens ego. The intermittent reward cycle. Even strong individuals respond to reinforcement patterns. Inconsistent praise, occasional warmth, moments of vulnerability. These keep hope alive. Hope is powerful. Hope says, it will go back to how it was. They just need time. This phase will pass. Hope prolongs endurance. Endurance allows control to deepen. The shame factor. When intelligent individuals realize something is wrong, they often feel shame. How did I not see this? I should have known. This doesn't make sense. Shame discourages seeking support. They internalize confusion, which increases isolation. Isolation increases vulnerability, and the cycle continues. The charisma shield. Many narcissists are socially skilled. They read people quickly. They adapt tone. They project competence. Charisma disarms skepticism, especially in ambitious environments, leadership spaces, corporate settings, creative industries. Confidence is rewarded, certainty is admired, and narcissistic personalities often project both. The gradual erosion effect. Even strong individuals weaken under sustained destabilization. Gaslighting erodes perception. Projection erodes identity. Withdrawal erodes security. Triangulation erodes confidence. This is not about intelligence, it is about prolonged exposure. Even stable structures weaken under constant pressure. The myth of immediate exit. People often ask, why didn't you just leave? Because leaving requires clarity. And narcissistic dynamics create confusion, because leaving requires self-trust. And gaslighting erodes it, because leaving requires energy, and prolonged destabilization drains it. It is not about weakness. It is about cumulative psychological strain. The attachment memory. Strong individuals remember the early phase, the admiration, the intensity, the connection. They hold on to that memory and compare current behavior to the best version of the narcissist, not the worst. This creates internal conflict. He's not always like this. She can be amazing. And that inconsistency sustains attachment. The strategic insight. Falling into narcissistic dynamics is not a reflection of intelligence. It is a reflection of human wiring. Desire for connection, desire for recognition, desire for intensity. Narcissistic personalities exploit universal drives, not weaknesses. Understanding this removes shame, and removing shame restores clarity. Because shame keeps you silent, clarity allows evaluation, and evaluation restores power. We have now dismantled the internal confusion. Finally, we will look at the psychological detachment, neutralizing the dynamic. This is not about revenge, not about confrontation. It is about structural withdrawal and move toward stabilization. We move to the most important part. Not analysis, not exposure, stability. Because understanding narcissistic dynamics is only half the work. The other half is psychological detachment, not emotional collapse, not retaliation, not dramatic exit. Detachment, calm, structural, strategic. Chapter 12, Psychological Detachment, Neutralizing the Dynamic. You cannot out-argue narcissism. You cannot out-explain it. You cannot love it into stability, because the structure is not relational, it is defensive, and defensive structures resist confrontation. So the solution is not escalation, it is disengagement from the psychological game. Detachment is not coldness. Detachment does not mean becoming cruel. It does not mean suppressing emotion. It means separating your identity from their distortions. When projection occurs, you do not internalize. When gaslighting appears, you do not debate endlessly. When triangulation surfaces, you do not compete. Detachment is refusal to participate in the manipulation architecture. The shift from emotional to observational mode. The most powerful internal shift is from participant to observer. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" you ask, "What pattern is repeating?" Instead of reacting emotionally, you analyze structure. Is there projection? Is there blame reversal? Is there intermittent reinforcement? When you label the pattern, it loses invisibility, and invisibility is its strength. Emotional non-reactivity. Narcissistic control feeds on reaction, anger, defensiveness, desperation, over-explanation. When emotional intensity is reduced, the supply loop weakens. Calm responses disrupt rhythm, short answers, neutral tone, minimal emotional engagement, not hostility. Stability. This is sometimes called the gray rock effect. Be uninteresting to the dynamic, because drama requires participation. Boundary reinforcement. Detachment also requires clarity of boundaries, not aggressive, not defensive, clear. This behavior is not acceptable. I will not engage in this conversation. I disagree. No long justification. No emotional escalation. Boundaries are statements, not debates. If someone resists boundaries consistently, the pattern reveals itself, accepting what cannot be changed. One of the hardest parts of detachment is abandoning the hope of transformation. You cannot fix their insecurity engine. You cannot stabilize their false self. You cannot force introspection. If you keep trying, you remain inside the cycle. Acceptance reduces fantasy. Fantasy sustains attachment, restoring internal authority. Gaslighting weakens self-trust. Projection confuses identity. Detachment restores internal authority. You trust your perception again. You trust your emotional signals. You stop outsourcing reality confirmation. Internal authority reduces susceptibility. Because manipulation thrives on uncertainty, social reinforcement. Isolation weakens detachment. Healthy external perspectives strengthen it. Trusted friends, mentors, therapists, objective observers. Not for validation of anger, but for recalibration of perception. Clarity grows in balanced environments, not in closed loops. When direct separation is required, sometimes detachment means reducing contact or eliminating it, because certain structures cannot be neutralized within proximity. If escalation continues despite boundaries, distance becomes protective. Distance is not defeat, it is preservation. You do not argue with instability. You remove yourself from it. The identity recovery. After prolonged exposure, you may feel uncertain about who you are. Detachment includes rebuilding identity independently. What are your values, your preferences, your boundaries, your goals? not in reaction to them, but independent of them. Identity reconstruction restores stability. Stability reduces vulnerability, the calm advantage. The ultimate neutralizer of narcissistic dynamics is calm indifference, not emotional shutdown, not revenge. Calm clarity. When someone cannot provoke reaction, cannot destabilize perception, cannot trigger insecurity, the dynamic weakens, because supply diminishes. Control requires energy. Detachment withdraws it. The final insight. Narcissistic control is powerful because it operates invisibly, through admiration, through distortion, through comparison, through silence, through projection, through escalation. But once you understand the architecture, you are no longer confused by it. Confusion sustains control, clarity dissolves it. Detachment restores power, and power, in this context, is simply the ability to choose your response.